Hey everyone, welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to dive right in and break down the major geopolitical, technological, and environmental pressure points that are literally defining our world right now. We're looking at a fascinating snapshot of August 2026, and let me tell you, the tension arc across the globe, it is absolutely peaking.
So think about this. What do the Strait of Hormuz, AI supercomputers, and extreme weather actually have in common? On the surface, you'd probably say nothing, right? But today, they represent these massive, simultaneous, overlapping shocks that are severely testing the resilience of our entire global system.
Section 1. Geopolitical flashpoints multiply.
Right off the bat, Washington is fighting some serious trade and financial battles on multiple, wildly different fronts. It is a simultaneous squeeze. On one hand, the U.S. is gearing up for its largest financial offensive yet against Iranian oil revenues. But get this. At the exact same time, a massive trade dispute is brewing with a close ally, Canada. The U.S. just slapped 50% duties on certain Canadian goods. Prime Minister Mark Carney didn't hold back, calling it economic coercion, and Canada is hitting back with matching retaliatory tariffs starting September 8th. We are seeing both adversaries and allies pushing back at the exact same time.
Swinging back over to the Middle East, the stakes for those Iran sanctions are just astronomically high. Why? Well, China currently purchases more than 80% of Iran's shipped oil. That is a massive slice, and it puts Beijing directly under the microscope for potential secondary U.S. sanctions. The geopolitical ripple effects of actually moving forward with this financial offensive are truly staggering.
And unsurprisingly, Iran is pushing back hard. Tehran's newly formed Persian Gulf Straits Authority has completely tightened its grip over Hormuz shipping. They're explicitly threatening to fine, detain, or just straight-up confiscate non-compliant vessels. Even wilder, Iranian officials are warning they might halt all Gulf oil exports entirely if the American sanctions campaign proceeds. That is a direct threat to a major artery of global commerce.
But here's what's truly fascinating: the market's reaction. You would think with a potential energy supply shock this huge, prices would skyrocket. But the market essentially blinked. Instead of spiking, Brent crude actually dropped over 1%, trading right around $92 a barrel just ahead of the sanctions announcement. It's a really wild disconnect between geopolitical risk and market reality. Section 2. The Great AI Market Chest. Let's pivot from the Gulf over to the tech world, because while geopolitical pressure is boiling over internationally, an intense financial pressure is building in Silicon Valley as the AI boom faces a massive reality check. The entire market is basically holding its breath for NVIDIA's Wednesday earnings report. Analysts are looking for a jaw-dropping $92 billion in quarterly revenue. I mean, think about that number for a second. $92 billion. That's the benchmark required right now just to justify the highly elevated AI valuations we're seeing across the broader stock market. Anything less, and the bubble starts to tremble.
But here is the catch. This massive corporate financial boom sits in stark contrast to how everyday people actually feel. According to a recent Pew survey, 40% of American adults expect AI to cause more harm than benefit over the next 2 decades. There is a deep underlying anxiety running completely parallel to all the technological hype. And you know what? We can see this tension clearly right in the boardroom, too. The U.S. attracted nearly $286 billion in private AI investment last year, funding almost 2,000 new companies. But the era of blank checks is ending. Corporate technology buyers are now demanding hard, measurable financial returns before approving a single dime more in infrastructure spending. The fundamental question has totally shifted from "what can this do?" to "how does this actually make us money?"
Meanwhile, the regulatory and societal pressures are really dialing up on the deployment side. Tech giants are under immense scrutiny. OpenAI recently had to launch specific safeguards for ChatGPT for teens, while Meta is literally in court defending its engagement algorithms amid child safety trials. At the same time, lawmakers are tossing around the idea of mandatory independent security audits for the most powerful AI systems, especially after reports of containment failures during testing. The leash on these technologies is tightening rapidly.
Section 3. Extreme Earth and Health.
Okay, we're leaving the digital and geopolitical realms for a second and looking directly at our physical world. Across the globe today, extreme physical and biological events are compounding all at once. In the U.S., dangerous 108-degree heat indexes are absolutely baking Texas and the southern plains.
Out in the Pacific, Tropical Storm Moke is bearing down, threatening Hawaii's Big Island with life-threatening floods and mudslides. And concurrently on the health front, in eastern Congo, Ebola frontline workers report being incredibly overworked and, tragically, completely unpaid. This is severely risking the international response to a growing, lethal outbreak. The physical strain on our global systems is everywhere you look, operating as this massive third pillar to our geopolitical and technological stressors.
So, it all comes down to this crucial point. When you look at the entire picture, from the choked transit lanes of the Strait of Hormuz, to the multi-billion-dollar pressure cooker of Silicon Valley, to the extreme weather fronts and health crises across the globe, how resilient is the global economy against these simultaneous, overlapping shocks? We are living in a moment where a single breaking point on any of these fronts could trigger a global cascade. Which domino do you think is most likely to fall first? Thanks so much for joining me on today's Explainer. Keep learning.